Good morning from the Willow Rose Cottage. I am having a little bit of a hard time starting this video today. I've started it a couple times and my throat chakra keeps acting up, but I made the decision to try to just deal with it today or deal with it this video. So if I cough a little bit or I have to clear my throat, I'm sorry. That happens when I have a hard time saying what I need to say. However, as we know, there's been, pardon me, as we know, there's been a lot of division in our country over the last week. And as you also know, I'm not a political person. I don't lean one way or the other. I don't call myself a moderate because I have opinions, but those opinions kind of go across the board depending on the situation and what's happening in that situation. So I have a friend that was amongst the ones that lost positions because of something she posted. The post was that she would not have empathy for a misogynist. She lost her position on the Democratic chair of Tuolumne County and leader of the Democratic Party, and also as a she lost some positions, and right now they're voting on whether or not they want to take her off of her daughter's soccer team as the coach. There are consequences for your behavior. That's something that I have always taught my children. Free speech is free, but there could be consequences for it. Actions have consequences as well. And as my children were growing up into their teens and adulthood, I had a phrase that I told them. It is your choice to decide what you want to do. Think long and hard about the consequences that may arise from your actions, because those consequences are yours and yours alone to deal with. And that's what I always told them when they wanted to do something, whether it was be experiment with drugs or whatever. I kind of consider myself a strict yet liberal mother. I used to say that I have my children in a safety realm, and within that realm, they're free to do what they need to do, to experiment and to try to understand life, but they could not go out of that safety realm. And that's a whole concept and a whole philosophy and ideology that I had as a mother, a very young mother. I had my first child at 19. I had 2 more children immediately after that. I raised them largely on my own by myself. I went to school and worked 3 jobs. I graduated with high honors while raising my children. So I had to keep a very, very tight rein on them. However, I knew that they would experiment and that they would go out there in the world and that they would make their mistakes. And I stood by them when they made their mistakes, but I didn't make excuses for the consequences of the mistakes that they made. So yesterday I decided to have a luncheon, and I invited several friends, and we talked about what's happening in the world, not in details, but in large concepts. And one of my ideas at the table was, how about radical love? How about we go back to who we were as women prior to the patriarchy taking over who we are, such as midwives, women that understood the herbs, women that understood the medicines, and dare I say, women that understood the plants that could cause a miscarriage if that's what the mother wanted. As of this video, no rights have been taken away. In fact, one of the guests at my luncheon had just had an abortion. she didn't feel it was a good time for her to try to bring a life into this world. So we discussed that idea of what would happen if those rights were taken away. How would we as women work on that? How would we respond to that? And I just turned 65 and just had my croning ceremony. And I am now a crone, so I do feel responsible for the younger people in my life. One of my extremely close friends is in her 30s, and I have another beautiful, beautiful woman that is in my circle that's in her 40s. So they are still in their childbearing years. And I do feel a responsibility to help them, because it is of my opinion that maybe we should gather quietly in sacred spaces and learn how to bring back our safe spaces, learn how to bring back the medicines that can help us when we get ourselves into scary places. Learn how to have women, strong women in our lives that will help us and guide us and show us and teach us how not to get ourselves in the gray area. I myself, at 18, was in a gray area. I brought that up at our luncheon, and I asked the younger people at the table, the younger women at the table, here was my situation. I met a roadie for Blue Oyster Cult. I was a model. I was modeling at an event. I couldn't find my car. He helped me find my car. We started drinking. I drank too much, so he offered to drive me home. He drove me home. We got into a situation that I shouldn't have been in. And by the time I sobered up and was trying to say that this isn't what I wanted, it was too late. And I posed the question, was that? Because I had never considered it. I remember thinking, and I've said this quite a few times, when I read the statistics on how many women are victims of SA, I always counted myself among the lucky ones that wasn't part of that statistic. And yesterday at that table, the younger people said absolutely 100% that was because you withdrew consent. So, and he did not honor that. However, it was the 70s. And this is something that I was saying to the women at my table. The 70s, we were just coming out of the 60s, which was a huge sexual revolution. The birth control pill had just been created and widely distributed. So there were no consequences to your sexual behavior. So then it created an environment of free love. And so the 70s is when my incident happened. And I was of a culture and a time period where I didn't see that as SA. And then the conversation turned to how society has evolved to really educate, and especially with the internet, to educate young women about what their rights are. And while I don't think that's a bad thing, I think it's a confusing thing. And I myself have been very, very confused. Excuse me. I've been really confused these last few days. my belief system from the very beginning of my coming into adulthood was to go back to the old ways, to go back to the pre-patriarchal days, to go back to the pre-Christian days, and to look at women as the power holders, to look at women as the women that hold the land, that hold the secrets, that hold the medicine, that give birth, that are the women that know the herbs to help the women through childbearing. That we, of course I had a midwife, and I was going to say that we didn't split ourselves in order for a baby to come. We allowed our bodies to stretch to let that baby come through. And these are things that I have held not as opinions, but as life view, that we eat clean and pure food that we grow. At one point, I had a garden that was over an acre. I lived on 180 acres. I had a garden that was a full acre. It was an abandoned orchard. I had wild blackberries. I had apples. I would make apple juice for my children from the apples. And somehow along the way, I've lost my way a little bit too. My children growing up, life events happening to me, relationships breaking down, and losing partners that helped me in that lifestyle. And that was something I was working towards when I was looking for my property. And one of the things I was working towards when I was trying to purchase property was to have women's circles and bring women together. One of the things that I feel very blessed about is at my croning ceremony, I had women there in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, and beyond their 60s, in their 60s and beyond their 60s. And when we were sitting at the ceremony, one of the things that I did in the ceremony that I don't want to say I wasn't able, but I was asked not to record it because my daughter was conducting the ceremony. My daughter brought me into my cronehood years. But one of the things that they did is they created an arch for me. They stood on either side and they created an arch. And I started on one end as a mother, and I danced through the arch. And as I came out of the other end of the arch, I was now in my crone years. And I take those responsibilities seriously. And I take those responsibilities seriously to the women that sheltered me as I danced my way into my cronehood. I don't know what's going to happen in this world right now, but one of the things I was able to help my young friend that was, and still is, she has death threats against her. She has to get a restraining order to keep someone very frightening away from her that's threatening her. We live in a small area, as you know, and one of the things that I was talking to her is about love and how can we navigate this time with love? How can we navigate this time with compassion? And empathy is something I think that is hard for a lot of people. I'm an empath. Empathy comes really easy for me. In fact, I have been called out more times in my life than I care to admit, from people that have asked me, why are you friends with so-and-so? They have no friends. And I say, that's why I'm friends with them. And that doesn't land well with people. Sometimes people put things, their ideas, and their anger about those ideas and their beliefs. They put them in a really tightly sealed package, and they don't want to open that package and examine them again. All I'm asking, and all I'm asking my friends that I had at my luncheon yesterday, let's open those packages and see if those belief systems and those ideas and that anger still apply. See if they're still relevant to who we are today. This being said, I probably will not be posting for a while. And I know that the last time I tried to stop posting, I got pushed back. And I love it when you push back because you're like, no, don't stop. And I love that. My ego absolutely loves that. But I kind of feel like there's a time right now for me to pull back and understand this new phase of life that I'm in, understand the responsibilities that I have to myself, to my intimate circle of female women. I call them my circle of stones. And there's a book that I give to all my friends when they have crossed that threshold from being a friend to being a friend that sits at my table, metaphorically and literally. It's called A Circle of Stones. And I feel right now a responsibility to my circle of stones, especially right now when things are so tumultuous, when things are so in upheaval and best friends are fighting against each other and families are fighting against each other and people are polarizing themselves on two sides of a spectrum. I am the person that naturally, organically, and through my life has always been center. One of my incredibly best friends, she's been on my channel. She's been in my life for an extremely long time. She's been very instrumental in some of my major life devastating events. She's been instrumental in being there by my side and helping me walk through those events. Is an extraordinarily right Christian fundamentalist, our fundamental Christian right conservative. And as I've already mentioned, Nikki, which is another one of my very, very, very close friends, you've seen her on this channel as well, is on the extreme other side. I can find a common ground with both of them. I love them both, and everyone in between. I need to take a step back from social media. I want to take a step back from being bombarded with information that is not organic to me, finding my own space within my circle of stones. I have created and cultivated a very diverse group of women that I trust to bring me their views and their ideas and to be able to articulate why they have these views and those ideas. And all of them are willing to enter into conversation with me to help me understand their views and their ideas. Here's to radical love and to trying to find a space in our hearts and in our souls to just turn to your friends and give them radical love instead of resistance. Turn to your friends and challenge the ideas they have neatly and tightly tucked away. Challenge it with love. Ask them to explain it. Ask them to re-examine what they're believing on both sides. And let's try to find that common ground of the things we have in common. And let's stop focusing so drastically and angrily and aggressively on the things we have not in common. I hope everyone here has a fabulous day. And until next time, stay whimsical.